Hey everyone. So, have you ever been working on a new game in Unity? You've got your player, you've got an obstacle, you hit that play button full of excitement, only to watch your character drive right through a wall like it's not even there? Yeah, it's a super common problem. But guess what? We're gonna fix it right here, right now. In this explainer, we're gonna dive into how to make objects in your 2D world actually feel solid, how to make them bump, crash, and interact using Unity's awesome physics engine.
You know the feeling, right? You've got a scene that looks just like this. There's your player, maybe a cool car like this one, and you've set up an obstacle. You're expecting a collision, a reaction, something. But when you drive forward, poof, it just phases right through. The reason is, to Unity, these are just pictures, just flat images hanging out in space. They don't have any substance, no physical form. Our job is to tell Unity, hey, these things are solid.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by tackling that ghost objects problem head-on. Then we'll give our objects some physical boundaries using things called colliders. After that, we'll introduce them to the physics engine with rigid bodies. We'll even fix a weird gravity issue that pops up, create some awesome two-way collisions, and finally, we'll tweak the shapes to get the game feel just right. Let's dive in. All right, section 1, the problem. Before we can even think about a solution, we need to understand the problem inside and out. So let's build our little obstacle from the ground up and see for ourselves why everything is acting so ghostly. We need something for our player to crash into, after all.
Okay, let's do this together step by step. First, look over at your hierarchy window. You know, that list on the left with all your game objects. Just right-click in some empty space there. A menu's gonna pop up. I want you to go to 2D Object, and from there, pick Sprite. Boom! Unity just made a new blank object for us. Now, with that new object selected, turn your attention to the inspector window on the right. This shows you everything about the selected object. Right now, it's just a white square. Let's give it a shape. In the Sprite Renderer component, click the little circle icon next to the word Sprite. This opens up a window with all your available sprites. Let's just pick the built-in circle. Okay, it's a bit small, so let's scale it up. At the very top of the inspector, you'll see the transform component. Find the scale fields and let's just type 2 for X, 2 for Y, and 2 for Z. Perfect. And just for fun, let's give it a new color. In the Sprite Renderer, click the white box next to color and pick something that stands out. I'm going to go with a nice bright orange. There we go.
So we've got our shiny new obstacle. Moment of truth. Let's go to the top of the editor and hit that big play button. I'm going to drive my little car over to the circle, brace for impact, and nothing. We go right through it. The circle doesn't budge, our car doesn't even slow down. Absolutely zero interaction. And this is the key takeaway here. Right now, these are just pictures. Unity has no clue they're supposed to be solid objects. We need to give them a physical presence.
And that brings us to section 2, defining boundaries. To fix our ghost problem, we need to give our objects an invisible physical boundary. We do that using a special component called a collider, which is kind of like giving our object its own personal force field.
So what in the world is a collider? Well, the easiest way to think about it is this. Your sprite, the image you see, that's for the player. The collider is for the physics engine. It's this invisible shape that we attach to our object that basically screams at Unity, hey, this is the physical edge of this thing. Don't let anything else cross this line unless I say so. It's the invisible force field that finally lets things actually bump into each other.
Now, okay, listen up, because this is probably the #1 mistake that beginners make, and it can be so frustrating if you don't know what's happening. When you go to add a collider, you'll see a bunch of options. Some have 2D on the end, and some don't. The rule is super simple, but absolutely critical. If you're making a 2D game, you must use the 2D components. Box Collider 2D, Circle Collider 2D, all those guys. The ones without the 2D are for 3D games. The 2D physics engine and the 3D physics engine are like two separate universes. They don't talk to each other. If you mix them up, your collisions will just silently fail, and you'll be pulling your hair out wondering why. All right, theory is over. Let's put it into practice. We're going to start by adding a collider to our player vehicle. So go over to your hierarchy and click on your player to select it. Then look at the inspector. Scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see a big Add Component button. Go ahead and click that. A search window pops up. Just start typing collider in there, and you'll see that list we just talked about. Now, my player's sprite is kind of long with rounded ends, so the Capsule Collider 2D is a perfect fit. I'll click on that one.
And as soon as you do that, check this out. Look really closely at your player in the scene view. See that? There's now a thin green line that's outlining the shape of your car. That green line is your collider. That's the force field we've been talking about. The player will never see this line in the actual game, but to Unity's physics engine, that green line is the new reality of your object's shape.
Okay, your turn. A little pop quiz for you. You just saw me add a collider to the player. Based on what we've just covered, can you add the right kind of 2D collider to our orange circle object? Go ahead, I'll give you a second to figure it out.
All right, how'd you do? Did you get it? The steps are exactly the same. First, you select the circle in your hierarchy. Then you hop over to the inspector, hit Add Component, and search for Collider. And since our object is, well, a circle, the Circle Collider 2D is the obvious choice. Click that, and you should see a perfect green circle appear around your sprite. Awesome. Both of our objects now have a defined physical shape. Okay, on to Section 3, Introducing the Physics Engine. So we've given our objects these invisible boundaries, but that's really only half the battle. If you were to hit play right now, you'd notice they still pass right through each other. So what gives? Well, it's because we haven't actually told Unity's physics engine to pay attention to them yet. We need one more component to really bring them to life.
And that missing piece is called the rigid body 2D. A rigid body is what gives an object its substance. It's the official handshake with the physics engine. When you add a rigid body 2D, you're basically tapping Unity on the shoulder and saying, hey, see this thing? I want you to start treating it like a real object. Give it mass, let it be affected by forces like gravity, and make it react when it smacks into other stuff. And here is the most important rule of all. For a physical collision to happen, at least one of the objects involved has to have a rigid body.
So you know the drill. Let's get a rigid body on our player. First up, select your player object from the hierarchy. Go back over to the inspector, scroll down, and click that friendly Add Component button again. In the search bar this time, you're going to type rigid body. And remember our golden rule, we're in a 2D game, so we absolutely must choose rigid body 2D. Click to add it, and that's it. Our player is now officially on the physics engine's radar.
All right, Section 4. With our rigid body on board, we are finally ready to see a real collision. So let's hit play, but you might notice something a little strange happens. We've actually just created a brand new problem that we need to solve.
So you press play, ready for a glorious collision, and instead your player just falls. It just drops right off the bottom of the screen like it fell off a table. What is going on? We didn't tell it to do that. This is a super common point of confusion, but the explanation is actually really simple.
This is a classic Unity gotcha, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. When we added that rigid body, we didn't just turn on collisions, we turned on all physics by default. And what's the most famous force in all of physics? Gravity. If you look at the rigid body 2D component you just added, you'll see a property called gravity scale. And by default, Unity sets it to 1. Now this is great if you're making a platformer where you want your character to fall, but for our top-down game, not so much. So what's the solution to our falling car problem? It's beautifully, elegantly simple. It's this one single number, 0. We just need to tell the physics engine, hey, for this object, let's just pretend gravity doesn't exist. So go back to your player's rigid body 2D component. Find that gravity scale property, click in the box, change that 1 to a 0, and hit enter. Now let's try this again. Hit play, and success! Our car stays put. It's no longer trying to dig a hole to the center of the earth. Okay, now we can drive over and test the collision. And bump! It stops. Look at that. The player actually stops when it hits the circle. We have our first successful one-way collision. That brings us to Section 5, two-way collisions. We have made some amazing progress. Our player no longer goes through the circle, but you'll notice the circle itself doesn't care at all. It's like hitting a mountain. Let's make this interaction feel a lot more dynamic and create a real two-way collision.
So here's what's happening under the hood. Our player has a collider and a rigid body, so it's a full-fledged physics object. But the circle only has a collider. That means the player knows to stop when it hits the circle's boundary, but the circle itself has no physics properties. It has no mass, no momentum, so it can't be pushed. It's an immovable object. Now, that's great if you're building a wall, but we want this to be more like a barrel we can knock around.
So this leads to the very obvious next question, right? We've made our player a physical object that can be stopped by a collision. So how do we give that same physical substance to the circle so that it can be moved by a collision? How do we make it react?
And I'm pretty sure you've already guessed the answer. We need to give the circle its very own rigid body 2D. So let's do it. Select the circle in the hierarchy, click Add Component, search for rigid body, and add that rigid body 2D. But wait, before you do anything else, what's the very next step? This part is critical.
You have to immediately find its gravity scale and change it from 1 down to 0, just like we did for the player. If you forget, the circle will just fall when you start the game. Okay, with that set to 0, now hit play. Drive into the circle and yes, it moves. We can push it. We now have a proper dynamic two-way physics interaction. How cool is that?
All right, we're on to our final section, refining your object's shape. Our physics are working perfectly, but now we can get into the really fun stuff, tweaking the feel of the interaction. The shape of your collider has a massive impact on gameplay, so let's see how we can change our player's collider to get a totally different effect.
Watch closely when I try to push the circle right now. Because we gave our player a capsule collider 2D, it has a rounded front. So when it hits the equally round circle, it tends to just glance off or slide around the edge. It's really hard to get a solid, head-on push. Everything feels a bit slippery. Now, this might be exactly what you want for some games, but what if I want my car to feel more like a powerful bulldozer? And this is how we can change that feel entirely. Instead of using that rounded capsule collider, we can swap it out for a box collider 2D. A box collider has a perfectly flat front edge. This means instead of glancing off, it's going to make solid, flat contact, letting us push things much more directly, just like a bulldozer. It's amazing how this one tiny component swap can totally change how your game feels to play. Let's try it. Select your player object again. In the inspector, find that capsule collider 2D component. Now here's a super useful trick for when you're experimenting. You don't have to delete the old component. You can just disable it by unchecking the little box in its top left corner. The component is still there, just turned off for now. Okay, with that disabled, click Add Component and add a Box Collider 2D. You'll see the green outline instantly change from a capsule to a box. Now hit play. Try pushing the circle again. Feel the difference? It's so much more direct. You can push it straight ahead. If you decide you love the new feel, you can go back, right-click on the name of that disabled Capsule Collider 2D, and choose Remove Component to get rid of it for good. All right, let's do a quick lightning round recap of the most important things we covered. First, colliders are the invisible force fields that define an object's physical shape. Second, rigid bodies are the bridge that connects our objects to the physics engine, allowing them to move and react to forces. Third, remember the golden rule. At least one object in a collision must have a rigid body. Fourth, and this will save you so much headache, always, always, always use the 2D versions of these components for 2D games. And finally, for top-down games, the magic trick is to set the gravity scale to 0.
So, in just a few minutes, we've gone from having these ghost-like objects that pass through each other to a dynamic, physics-based world where things feel solid and real. You now have the absolute fundamental building blocks for creating a game world that feels alive. You can make pushable crates for puzzles, bouncy enemies, or indestructible walls. So my question for you is this. Now that you understand the power of colliders and rigid bodies, what kind of awesome, dynamic, and fun interactions are you going to build into your game? The possibilities are literally endless, so get building and have fun.